All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And as people come in, they can catch up with us. Before we get started with our main presentation, I just want to give you some heads up on upcoming Libertyville Historical Society activities. The Cook Home opening is a little less than a month away. The Cook Home is open every Sunday in the summer from 2 to 4 p.m. And our first Sunday is June 7th. No reservation required. You can come anytime between 2 and 4. We do ask for $5 per adult, and kids are free. This year, in celebration of America's 250, we have taken the theme "We the People," and we're doing a exhibit on our second level focusing on community and service, showing artifacts and photographs from the collection that highlight service professionals and service organizations in Libertyville throughout time. We have some other special things this summer, again, celebrating the 250th. On Sunday, June 14th and Sunday, July 12th, there will be a pop-up exhibit in the library foyer from between 2 and 4, where you can come in and see some items that we don't have regularly on display in the Cook Home. June 14th will be Made in Libertyville, so things that were manufactured in Libertyville. And Shop Local will feature on businesses up and down our main street. We don't generally have a History Matters program in the summer, but I will be presenting on the beginnings of Libertyville. We're celebrating our country's history. We can look at our local history. Good time to do that now as well. It will be in person only on Wednesday, July 1st, and then Zoom only on July 8th. Registration is now open for those programs. Our fifth annual, I believe, the View from the Park walking tour is Sunday, August 23rd. Registration will open in mid-July. And our definitely fifth annual cemetery walk will be Saturday, September 12th at Lakeside Cemetery. We are featuring 5 Libertyville men who died in World War II based on the research of Joseph Nemers, who wrote a couple of books called 29 Knocks at the Door. Watch for announcements of that and registration opening in mid-August. And something that is a collaboration between the Historical Society, the library, and the Libertyville Recreation Department. We have partnered on a program for this summer called Stars and Parks Adventure, which features 16 parks around town. And at each park, there's going to be a sign that has a fact about the park, a fact about our local history, and a national history fact. There's going to be a sheet that you can pick up either at the library or at the recreation department starting June 1st. And between June 1st and July 31st, if you can visit the parks, you'll get a code on each of the signs. And if you submit your completed sheet back to the library or the recreation department, you will win a fabulous prize and be submitted for a more fabulous prize. So that starts June 1st. The sheets will be available at the library and the recreation department, which is on Riverside Drive. All right, and as always, a plug to join the Historical Society. These programs and all the things that you saw on our summer schedule are put together by an all-volunteer and donation-based organization. So if you enjoy our programming and what we do invite you to join the society. It's very minimal cost, but it helps us a lot. So that is all of my advertisements. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping on the Zoom controls here. All right. We are going to be taking questions at the end. Please feel free to put them into the chat, and we'll pull up the chat after Mr. Carlson's presentation. I'm going to do a introduction now. So Norm Carlson's first career was 34 years at Arthur Anderson & Co., focusing on the transportation and manufacturing industries. His second career was stabilizing financially challenged businesses. He represented Lake County on Metro's board of direction and is the president of the Shoreline Interurban Historical Society and its managing editor. He is the editor of A Transportation Miracle, the story of the 28th International Eucharistic Congress that was held in Chicago on June 20th to 24th, 1926. We also have with us tonight the Most Reverend George J. Erastus, and he's a retired auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Chicago. He is a graduate of the University of St. Mary of the Lake in Mundelein, and he has served as a priest for 60 years. The highlights of his career in serving Lake County include being the pastor at the Church of St. Mary in Lake Forest, the victor of the churches in Lake County and certain townships in the northwest portion of Cook County, and founder of the Cristo Rey St. Martin College Prep School in Waukegan. Welcome to both of our guests, and Norm, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny, for asking us to be here. And Bishop Erastus had a significant role in the creation of this publication. He opened up the archives of the Archdiocese of Chicago and the Mundelein Seminary to us, and we received incredible cooperation from both archives. And of course, many of the photographs that appeared. Some of these slides we're going to go through relatively quickly, but at this point, I think we need to recognize uh, Cardinal Mundelein, George William Mundelein, who sent a message to the Pope. If you permit the next International Eucharistic Congress to be held in Chicago, I will provide you a million communion, a million people who will receive communion as a spiritual bouquet to your august uh, presence. Well, on the first evening of the Congress, 1.5 million people received communion in the Archbishop of Chicago, Archdiocese of Chicago. Mundelein was a true believer in Daniel Burnham. Make no small plans. And here he is. He was born July 2nd, 1872, to a poor but respectable German family in New York. He was a child prodigy. He turned down an appointment to the United States Naval Academy to become a priest, and he went through his education process to become a priest so fast that he was too young to be ordained. So he was sent to Rome for further studies. Mundelein was ordained in 1895. On December 9th, 1915, he was appointed as the third Archbishop of Chicago. In that era of the 19 teens, if you will, the Vatican looked upon Chicago as a mission because in their mind, everything west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was the Wild West. Mundelein, among other things, created Catholic Charities, and he was also involved and considered himself to be among the CEOs of Chicago, so he ingratiated himself to all of the business leaders in Chicago. This is the opening dinner for Catholic Charities 4 days after the declaration of war in World War I. The original purpose was to help the churches and the struggling people within the Archdiocese of Chicago, which was much larger then than it is now. But they immediately started to focus on how they would assist people during World War I. In 19, also look one more slide, please. In 1924, he regarded the church as something he wanted to call the American church. Up until this time, there were many silos within the archdiocese based on where you came from, i.e., the Irish church, the Polish church, and so on and so on. He wanted to make sure that the church in Chicago, the Roman Catholic Church in Chicago, functioned as an American church, and he tried very hard to break down these various silos, if you will. Mundelein was a car guy. During his tenure in Chicago, he had 5 Duesenbergs, 3 at one time, and 2 Minervas. This here he is riding in a Minerva, which was the Belgian-built equivalent of a Rolls-Royce. This is St. Mary's Lake before the development of what is now Mundelein Seminary. And as Bishop Rassus points out, it's a mile around the lake if you want to walk around the lake. The original accumulation of property has been referred to in two sources. One is 1,000 acres and the other is 1,300 acres. In any event, this is where the seminary was built surrounding the lake. And the purpose of the seminary was to make sure that all priests that came out of Mundelein were, quote, American priests. Here is the construction of the buildings that started in the main buildings that started in 1924. And believe it or not, this photo was taken by the North Shore Railroad. We are looking over the lake from the landing, and it was Mundelein's vision that he would be standing next to the Pope, who would come to Mundelein for some form of a seminary, a celebration. Unfortunately, at that time in 1926, the popes did not travel internationally, so the Pope sent a representative, which we'll talk about more. The excuse me here as I'm running my pages in the notes here. This is what finally developed as around the lake, and you can see the bridge over the little outlet of the lake here. And this is what was available and built in 1926 when the Eucharistic Congress was underway. The final buildings were not completed until 1934, so this was a major event and a major undertaking by the Archdiocese. Mundelein wanted the area to be named after him. The area had various names and over the years, and he decided he wanted it in his name. And so the seminary could be referred to as Mundelein Seminary. Well, as a gift to the village of Mundelein for naming the area, the village Mundelein, he gave them this fire engine, which was their first motorized fire engine. He was referred to as the German Cardinal. And yes, that's FDR. Remember that he spent 3 years in Rome being educated. One of them became Cardinal Bazzano, who represented the Pope at the Eucharistic Congress. Another one went and became the apostolic delegate to Germany. This friendship caused the fellow who was in Germany to be telling Mundelein what exactly was going on in Nazi Germany in the 30s, and Mundelein was feeding that information to FDR, believe it or not. So that's where FDR was getting his intelligence on what was going on inside Germany leading up to World War II. Mundelein passed away on October 2nd, 1939. He is entombed behind the altar here at Mundelein Seminary. The night that he passed away, one of FDR's people were visiting with him, staying overnight. They woke him up and hustled him out off the seminary properties before the police arrived, so they would not have found a representative FDR, and that would have broken down all the confidentiality that was going on between Mundelein and FDR. This is Samuel Insull. Insull owned through various companies, Commonwealth Edison, Northern Illinois Public Service, which was then the electric utility in Lake County, Northern Illinois Gas. The Chicago Rapid Transit Company was a subsidiary of Commonwealth Edison, if you can believe that. The Chicago South Shore and South Bend, the Chicago Aurora and Elgin, and the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee. Insull provided the workforce to help behind the scenes to make the Congress efficient and to move people around. And he was probably the kind of the chief operating officer of at the time, to make sure that everything functioned from a transportation point of view and moving the people. The North Shore Railroad opened its Skokie Valley route on June 5th, 1926, and on June 24th was the closing ceremony, and they were moving all sorts of trains all over the place. On the Skokie Valley route, trains were coming from Chicago. On the Mundelein branch, trains were shuttling between Lake Bluff and Mundelein. A temporary terminal was built where Carmel Catholic High School is today. And when the people were moving to get to the closing ceremonies in the morning, and they were leaving after the rainstorm in the afternoon, by my calculation, there was a train on the Mundelein branch at every 75 seconds. Here is the elevated, which provided trains from 63rd and Stony Island and 63rd and Halsted Street in Englewood, that using rapid transit equipment ran through to Mundelein. Here is Mundelein arriving, and next to him, to the right in the screen, is Cardinal Bonzano, who he also met in his 3 years in Rome. So they were very close friends as well. Bonzano was the papal representative based in Washington, D.C. His real name was Giovanni, but he used John when he was in the United States. This is the crowd at the first general session that was held in Soldiers Field. There were hundreds of thousands of people that attended this mass. This is the size of the attendance that was at Soldiers Field. The Chicago surface lines, the operator of the streetcars and the early buses and trolley buses, had a fleet of 3,539 streetcars. Every one of them was in service except for 11 cars that were under repairs. During the Congress, the surface lines provided 15 million passenger trips, which on average was 600,000 more trips than the average Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday during that period of time. This is what Chicago looked like in 1926. It's very familiar to us that grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s of Chicago. And the 50s was when they started building buildings again, like the Prudential Center, the Prudential Towers. This was the headquarters of the Eucharistic Congress. It was directly behind Holy Name Cathedral, facing Wabash Street. And here was the official postcard. The surface lines produced a map to assist visitors to the Eucharistic Congress, and they also provided sightseeing guides. There was an estimate that 800,000 people came to Chicago, some just for the day, to participate and attend meetings or the general sessions at Soldiers Field. This is the publication that the Archdiocese created in 1927, which was the base document in our research for our publication, A Miracle of Transportation. This is the ship that brought the European delegation, which was a number of cardinals, to the celebration here in Chicago. New York welcomed them with open arms and held many events in New York before the European delegations came to the Chicago. Now, the one fellow who would not join the Cardinals coming from Europe and the East Coast was the Cardinal from Boston. So somehow his group, probably by train, came to Buffalo, and then they boarded. This is the South American. They boarded the South American. So here is the Boston delegation pulling into Chicago on the Chicago River. Going back to New York, here was the invitation for the prelates back in New York, and they had quite dinners and receptions and everything else with going on in New York. They came to Chicago on this train. The Pullman Company ran this train once. All of the cars were painted in cardinal red rather than in Pullman green. The president of the New York Central Railroad, this photo actually is taken on what is now the South Shore Line, just east of Kensington. Of course, that's near the Pullman plant. As I noted, the president of the New York Central was a Catholic, so all of the crew members, dining, operating, you name it, any New York Central person who was on this train was a Catholic. It left New York and traveled overnight to Chicago. This is an example of a train coming through Syracuse, New York, when they ran. This, believe it or not, is the main line running on the streets of Syracuse. And boy, were they fed well. Here's the luncheon menu, the dinner menu, and the breakfast menu. So you can tell how much time they were spending on the train. Mundelein led a delegation from Chicago that moved on a private train from Chicago to Elkhart, where they boarded on the train, and the train came west on the New York Central to Porter, where it got on the Michigan Central to Kensington, and came down the Illinois Central, believe it or not, on suburban track 4, so that they were at the high level platforms. This is the crowd of students from Mount Carmel High School on the south side that were at the 64th Street end of the through platform for the 63rd Street station to greet. And there were groups like this all the way from Elkhart to Chicago to visit this, wave at the train as it went by. Here is the train departing 63rd Street on the Illinois Central Suburban tracks going under the Jackson Park Elevated. And here they are arriving at Roosevelt Road so that everyone could get off the train at a high level platform rather than having to step down the steps to get to the station level in the through passengers part of the Central Station. Of course, there were high level boarding to Grand Central Station. I think that's the reason why they picked this route. There was a massive parade down Michigan Avenue to welcome the guests, and all of the political and business leaders of Chicago were a part of this parade as well. And here is Mundelein and Bonzano in one of his cars going down in the parade with, of course, a motorcycle escort alongside. This is the crowd that greeted them as they arrived at Holy Name Cathedral. I don't know how they got through this, but somehow they did. That evening, there was a dinner hosted by the Archdiocese, for I'm sure many contributions, for all of the dignitaries that had come from either New York or around the world, and they literally came from around the world to participate in the Eucharistic Congress, because it is an international Congress. New at the time were microphones, And that square rectangular, or I should say rectangular box in front of the speaker is a microphone. Mundelein was fascinated with microphones because now he could address large numbers of people and they could easily hear him. This is the parade from Quigley Seminary to the opening mass that was in the in Holy Name Cathedral. There was a massive number of cardinals. I should say it's massive, but there was something like 800 bishops and archbishops, students from all over the area who participated in this parade, which was 3 blocks from Quigley Seminary to the Holy Name Cathedral. And here are the people outside of the cathedral for that opening mass. And the interior of the number of people, and you can see the decorations that were provided at Holy Name. This is, I believe, the first, I've lost track of where my notes are here, so I'm doing this extemporaneously. This, I believe, is the first Mass which was for, I believe, students. Next. This is the altar. This is a colorized photograph of the altar. This was the crowds that you had when the masses were going on and the events were going on in downtown Chicago for the celebrations. The Illinois Central had their 18th Street station right next to the Soldier Field, and they provided much more transportation to and from the events than some of the other commuter railroads in Chicago. This event was the Congress was in June. On July 21st of 1926, the IC operated its first electrified commuter train. This is the students. There were 62 students that made up the children's choir, and here they are crossing the IC tracks in their march to the Soldiers Field to attend the opening session. The second session was to focus on women. Again, hundreds of thousands of people participated both in the field and surrounding the field. This was the evening session on Tuesday evening for men, and they were encouraged to come from work, whatever dress they had, whether it's a suit and tie or whether it was the construction workers in their work clothes. This was Education Day. This was on Wednesday, and Education Day was focused on high school and college kids to encourage them to continue their education. And you can see the field is full of people as well as the grandstands. And again, there were people outside listening over the speakers because of the microphones. And that was a new adventure in having people outside the stadium that could hear what was going on inside the stadium. Again, the congestion in Chicago. I keep pointing this out because can you believe all of this congestion and the number of transit vehicles and automobiles that are competing for space on the streets? The North Shore operated the Cardinals train. This is the black and white view of the train taken by the North Shore Railroad. The first 2 cars, the motor cars, are in service only for a couple of days. The next 2 were dining cars, meant to be dining cars, but they stripped all the dining equipment out, chairs and tables out, and put parlor seats in. And then the rear car was one of their existing open platform observation cars that they really cleaned up and repainted for the trip from Wilson Avenue on the elevated, today's Red Line and Purple Line, all the way to Mundelein to the temporary terminal at what is now Carmel Catholic High School in Mundelein. The rear car, the observation car, was for the cardinals and the archbishops. The two other cars were for some of the priests, and I think the first two of the motor cars were for dignitaries and some other lay people that were invited to come on the train. Here is the observation car, which we've seen in Mitch Markovitz's painting at the opening of the presentation. Here is Mitch's rendition of what the front looked like. And the design, the creation, and the application of all of the bunting and extras, things on the side of the cars was the responsibility of Marshall Field and Company. Here is the interior of the dining cars that they turned into parlor cars. And you can see the interior bunting as well in this presentation by Mitch Markovitz. Here is the train, a side view of the 5 cars of the train crossing the sanitary canal between Evanston and Skokie on what today is the Yellow Line or the Skokie Swift. As I said earlier, the Skokie Valley route opened on July 5th, or June 5th, and this was at the end of June. And this was one of the stations along the way and was called Insel Spanish because of the design by Arthur Gerber, the interior architect for the Insel interests. The front part is the station itself, and the back part is the residence for the agent and his family or her family. Here is the train leaving Highwood. The interesting thing is we're trying to figure out where they turned the train because there wasn't, unless they took it down to the Stockyards branch to turn it. And here's the train boarding at excuse me, at Wilson Avenue. Buses, North Shore buses met them when they pulled into the temporary terminal at Mundelein and carried most of the people, some had to walk, but carried most of the people from the temporary station into the seminary property. This was the dinner at the seminary on Thursday, June 23rd. The people gathering before the Mass, but even before the Mass, was this procession around the property where there were all sorts of floats, all sorts of people marching. And in the middle of this, a huge thunderstorm hit. So everybody who was out there marching, including the Cardinals, were soaked to their skin by all the rain that just came out of nowhere. The advertisement from the North Shore to ride the trains. The fare was a little bit on the pricey side for that era. This was the temporary terminal, and again, this today is the property where Carmel Catholic High School is located in Mundelein. The car nearest the right is Chicago Rapids Transit medical car. They had doctors and nurses on assignment, and the tents, as you go away from the camera, were hospital beds to treat people in case they had any problems. The only problems that they incurred were some heat problems and some exhaustion problems from the heat, but there were no fatalities, believe it or not, and there were no serious injuries with all of these people that were up there. Again, here are the medical tents. This is the temporary terminal at Lake Bluff. At the left, you can see the Skokie Valley route turning into what was the Scranton Avenue station on the Skokie Valley route. And beyond the bridge in the distant background was the Shoreline route. The Skokie Valley route was exclusively used by the elevated equipment coming from Chicago. The North Shore concentrated every one of its cars, hauling people from the north side of Chicago and the northern suburbs, and from Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, and Waukegan to this point, where they transferred and they ran shuttle trains of elevated equipment from Lake Bluff to the seminary. Here are the crowds boarding at 223 South Wabash. I believe that was the station at that time, in downtown Chicago. The trains also stopped at Wilson Avenue. This is the North Shore station at Wilson Avenue, along it was shared with the elevated system. And here is a train of elevated equipment. This is not in 1926, but this is an example of elevated equipment on the Skokie Valley route. They used elevated equipment to move naval people between Chicago and Great Lakes, mainly boot camp people. And a little cartoon that was put out comparing the Holy Land to Mundelein. Here is a train unloading at the temporary station. This is probably a train from Chicago. Here we have another view of the temporary station. And here are the people coming back, walking through the mud, and they're soaked to the skin from all the rain. Here is the count of the car trips and the Lake Bluff shuttles. And you can this is for one day. As near as we can determine, and no one has found evidence to the contrary, this was the largest highest attended single day event in the history of Lake County. The emphasis is single day event. And here is the North Shore's report from the North Shore files giving the passenger count. Now, you notice a significant difference between the outbound and the inbound. There were actually more people that took the train inbound because they couldn't get their cars out of the mud in the parking lot. I just think the crews gave up trying to collect tickets. So I think the real count is really not known, but this was the report that they rendered to management. The Northwestern provided service, as I mentioned earlier. The Milwaukee provided service from Union Station to Libertyville. They had a branch that came into downtown Libertyville. It was south of the existing line to Fox Lake. But the people walked from Libertyville to Mundelein to attend the ceremonies. The Soo Line operated trains from the Forest Park area, which is basically where the Blue Line ends in Forest Park. And the Soo Line, now Canadian National, runs at the western boundary of the seminary, so they could deliver people directly to the seminary. All of the railroads, this happens to be an Illinois Central train, offered excursions to Chicago. The ones that did a lot of advertising were the Illinois Central, the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio, and this is when the Chicago River was being straightened out. And finally, going back to New York, this is Bonzano leaving Union Station, Chicago Union Station. Unfortunately, Bonzano became ill and died as a result of some surgery just months after the closing of the Congress. He passed away in 1927. So that is how all of these people were moved around, and to give you a little bit of a idea of the masses of people that participated in this. And I'm sure that Mundelein was very pleased with what happened and the results of it. And he was quite a powerhouse. Some people say he missed his calling. He should have been an investment banker on LaSalle Street due to his ability to raise money. And one of the things he did was raise $3 million, and he sent a delegation of Chicago businessmen to carry the $3 million check to Rome to deliver to personally deliver to the Pope. So we hope that you have learned something here this evening, and thank you for listening and with us. And we will turn it over to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Norm. I'm gonna pull up the chat here and see if we can't. Right. If you have any questions, okay, here's one. How is enough electrical generation capacity available to move all these trains?
They move slowly, I think is the answer. That's a very good question because the North Shore was always underpowered from an electric point of view for the speeds they wanted to run. The elevated probably had the ability to carry a significant load from their electrical distribution system. But of course, you didn't build an electrical distribution system on the North Shore for one day. So I think that the fact that the trains move slowly and did not pull a lot of electricity, and I'm sure some of the guys that I know that are listening to this could answer the question much better than I could.
I have another question. Do you have more photos of the North Shore cars and their exterior decoration, and where can they be found?
I think the answer is the book. As far as more photos, I think that I would consult with the Illinois Railway Museum and see if they have more photos.
Norm is referring to the book that the Shoreline put out called A Transportation Miracle. We have a copy in local history reference here. I believe we may also have a circulating copy at the Cook Library as well. So if you're looking to get a hold of that, definitely come into the library.
We could get you more copies.
And Norm will get us more copies. Let's see. Is there a museum where we can view these photos? I think the book is probably, a lot of the photos in the book are from the archives at St. Mary's, but that's not open to the public.
No, not.
Yeah.
No. The publication is the real answer.
Yeah, yeah. Were the pictures of downtown Chicago traffic congestion taken during the Congress or just showing Chicago congestion in general?
Most of them are during the Congress.
Okay. Are you aware of the important contribution provided by the Snow Bus Company? Buses ran all day to and from Libertyville to the seminary. That was a Libertyville company.
Yeah, I didn't. Our publication is concentrated on the rail. We make mention of the number of automobiles that came and the number of buses that came. And in the morning, all of the roads from Chicago and Milwaukee and Kenosha, et cetera, were one way to Mundelein. And in the afternoons, they were one way back out. And there was traffic direction people everywhere. And they had space on what is now the Carmel Catholic High School property for, I think it was over 1,000 cars. So again, there was no real count of how many people came because there was no way of counting the personal vehicles and the buses that were running.
Is there going to be a mass or celebration for the 100-year anniversary?
I'm Bishop Rassus. I am a resident of Libertyville currently. I attended the seminary from 1962 to 1968, just for your information, so I'm quite familiar with the area. I have encouraged the Archdiocese to commemorate the occasion, and I continue to do that, and I'm waiting for a response, and I hope that there will be something, but I've done my best, and Norman has as well, to provide them the information that they need, and I'm still waiting to hear back if there will be one official celebration, or they'll encourage the parishes to do something and so forth. But right now, I don't have the answer to that. But I hope that I can't imagine why it wouldn't happen. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and our hands folded.
Somebody online, you confirmed their daughter.
Oh, my goodness, are we still friends? I always ask that question, are we still friends? Kids are just unbelievable these days, and they're a delight to be with, and I certainly would not want to be growing up in their world, which is the world that all of us live in currently. I know that, but many of us much easier times when we were confirmed in third or fourth grade. Now the young people are junior high or high school, and that's when they need the grace of the sacrament and to realize that we as a people of faith, the church especially, is there to support them and encourage them. As I always like to say to the young people, use your gifts to make a difference in the world. And we all have gifts and abilities and talents, but we also have faith, and just to use our gifts to make the world a better place for everyone. So
He says yes, sir, you're still friends.
we're still friends. That's good.
Um,
I'm
and,
not quite sure, but I always ask that question.
we got another question.
Great.
So we got another question. Was regular North Shore Line service totally suspended to accommodate the massive amount of trade movements from Chicago to Lake Bluff?
On the Skokie Valley route, the answer is yes. They attempted to maintain service on the shoreline route, but I'm not sure with all the trains that were being running back and forth and all the people that were traveling, they were probably doing the best that they could. But yes, the Skokie Valley route was turned over entirely to the Eucharistic Congress traffic.
All right, that's all the questions that are there now. Does anybody have one more question for either of our speakers? Okay. For those of you who attended and anyone you know who registered, this was recorded. It will take me a couple of days, but I will get it up on the Libertyville Historical Society YouTube channel, and everyone will receive a link to that recording when it is available. I'd like to again thank our speakers for being here tonight. We really appreciate you being here in this close to the 100th anniversary of this major event in Lake County history. And if you want a copy of the book, you probably, I don't know, email you, Norm?
Well, we have a website.
A website, okay. And what website would they want to go to?
shore-line.org.
Okay, shore-line.org. If you're interested in getting a copy of the book, A Transportation Miracle.
And it is under the dispatch category. You'll see a couple categories on the website. It's under dispatch, dispatch.
All right. Thank you again all for attending. And we will hopefully see you at our special History Matters program in July and at the Cook Home during the summer. So thank you very much for your attention and support, and have a great evening.